Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic Mappa meeting. I'm joined in our Zoom meeting by our friends Rabbi and Grace and Ronald, who's down in Australia. Always good to have you folks with us. Just makes it that much more interesting. If you got comments or questions for the Rabbi, don't be afraid to jump in. But let's turn it over to Rabbi Schwartz. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. How you doing tonight? I got Ronald up on the screen.
Right. That's good.
There you
Good.
are. Rabbi, we're going to turn the class over to you.
Thank you very much. We're good to be here, and I'm gonna turn it over to the share screen. I believe that's the one I want. Yeah. You see 12 on your screen. Okay. Okay. So before we start, what would I want to say there? Is okay. Well, there was a comment or somebody a question about comparison of Isaiah 2 and Micha 4. It's almost the same verse, same words, and since it was mentioned, I'm just going to say that in my circles we don't spend a lot of time on the prophets. In other circles, they do. Not many in Jewish circles. In Jewish scholarly circles, there's not a lot of time anymore spent on the prophets. The time spent is really on Talmud, which is deep scholarship on the parameters of the mitzvahs, and then on what we're doing, Shulchan Aruch, which is the laws that come out of that, and exactly how it goes, what to do in certain circumstances. And what I would say about this is that remember that the Jewish position is that everything was contained in the 5 books of Moshe. He's the one that had the greatest vision. He was got the closest to God possible ever, and God dictated to him the words of his prophecy. No one else had that level of clarity. Says so right in the book. Says that's the tradition handed down, and so everything is contained in those words. The reason for further writings was to as commentary on that, as exposition on that, as examples of how the Jewish people tried to implement the holy life as they entered Israel and what happened. And it's not so easy when you're working in the world at that time. They were successful in some ways, some not. Not all that was necessary for us to know, so it was documented. But it certainly the prophets are not consulted for definitive messages on how to live. And so, having said all that, the 2 verses quoted, the one in Isaiah 2 and Micha 4, famous verses that there'll be general peace, nations will put down weapons, everybody will come to Jerusalem, to the mount of God, of Hashem, and meaning the temple, and everybody will recognize the supremacy of the Torah and the centrality of Hashem in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and there'll be peace, and there'll be a worldwide awakening or revelation of God's truth, and everybody will start pursuing it. And I talk about that in my book. This God makes sense because it seems to me that Rambam, Maimonides, and identifying the 13 elements which were considered the fundamentals of faith, of the Jewish faith, are really, in the way I analyze them, they're really just descriptions of reality. It's just setting out to describe, here's the way everything works. This is what God did and created, and how it works, and so on. And so it comes out like that. Now there's different opinions exactly about certain aspects of it, but I give my version, or at least one version, which I think is the Rambam's, and it makes sense. That's really what I'm seeking to do, is make sense out of it all, and that helps um, guide your life. Then that's what it's all about. So, if you have further questions, I take individual questions. Otherwise, I suggest you read the book. I think it's a very interesting read. So we're up to the last time we reviewed what we were doing about washing hands and so on. And so we're still in the middle of that subject. And I'm going to remove my marker here. There we go. And we're at 12. Shlomo says, we'll be talking about getting your hands ready for the day. And so he says now, because he had already instructed that you should wash with a vessel, pouring onto your hands. So now he says, if one dips his hands into a vessel of water, then that counts as hand washing for the purposes of reciting the Shema and the Amida prayer, which are the two main components of the morning service. But he has not yet removed the foul spirit from his hands, which he had mentioned earlier. If one dips each of his hands alternately into 3 different lots of water, not just into a vessel of water, but you're now this is like an alternate version of pouring water in your hands 3 times. So instead of pouring them on your hands 3 times, you're dipping your hands into 3 different lots of water. Then it's not clear whether he has removed the foul spirit from his hands. Interesting. He's not sure what to tell you. He doesn't want to rule on that. I guess he's heard of the opportunity, the alternative, but he didn't want to give an opinion. Okay, so my comment is, until now, one might have concluded that Rakaro's only reason for washing was to remove the foul spirit, because that's what he started with. But here, he clearly differentiates between that and washing just for the sake of prayer, even while the foul spirit lingers. He's not saying you can't pray with that foul spirit upon your fingertips. And this paragraph is the first time Rabbi Karo alludes to the reasons for washing given by Rosh and Rashba, which I described in paragraph 3 above, of getting ready for the day, for the service, for prayer or cleanliness. With regard to removing the foul spirit, which is what he introduced in the beginning, Rabbi Karo is not convinced that dipping 3 times is as effective as pouring 3 times. But he is sure that one would require at the very least 3 different lots of water in which to dip. Because he said if you just dip them in, that's not gonna do the job for that. Maybe it'll work for prayer, which he hadn't discussed yet. So now he introduced prayer and said, okay, so you've kind of sanctified yourself for prayer, but you haven't got rid of that foul spirit. And then he's not sure about dipping 3 times. Okay, so Mishabura, the more modern commentary on this, remember again, the Shulchan Aruch that we're reading, Rabbi Yosef Cairo wrote in the 1300s. Mishabura is a commentary written in the 1900s, early 1900s. So he explains that dipping into one lot of water would render it unsuitable for further dippings, because the water would have become impure in its own right. So by just dipping once, you've contaminated that water, and now you need a new lot. At least, presumably, it should then be treated with the same caution as mentioned in paragraphs 8 and 9 above. Also, presumably, this requirement, what do we say? I'm going to go back there and see. I forget now. 8 was talking about prior to prayer. Oh, he did mention prayer before. Sorry. So he's talking about prayer and hand washing before eating, and in 9, not be performed over the ground but into a vessel, because it's going to just sit there on the ground and constitute a source of foul odor. He wants it to run away. Okay, so back here. Also, presumably, this requirement for pouring suggests that the comment of Ramah in paragraph 7 above, wherein he was willing to forego the need for a vessel, was stated only to allow for prayer. Another washing would still be required to remove the foul spirit, and it would need a vessel. So for the foul spirit, you got to have a vessel. With regard to washing for prayer, not needing a vessel strongly supports Rush's contention, the Holy Rush, that the washing is for cleanliness purposes. The water will do the trick, not ritual. It's not a ritual. It's to actually get clean. But Rashba, who contended the washing emulates the priestly ritual of washing from the kior, which was the wash basin in the temple, to begin the day's service, that guy would be hard pressed to explain why we would not mimic the priests who washed with a vegetable. So he's not going to be happy about just dipping. Going on to the Shulchan Aruch, he now says if one has stayed awake all night, then it is not clear whether he needs to wash his hands for the morning prayer or whether he needs to remove the foul spirit. Did a foul spirit come just by the fact that you went through the night? And do you need to wash for morning prayers? And the Ramah says, so he should wash his hands without reciting a blessing. It's interesting. Shulchan Aruch left it. He was ready to say it's not clear and leave it at that. The Ramah came along and said, okay, here's what you do. You do it, but you don't make a blessing. And that's an interesting aside because the blessing contains God's name. And it became a very strict thing not to say God's name in vain, especially in a blessing, not to make a blessing that was unnecessary. Because I can't even really answer why not, because you could say a verse with God's name. There's nothing promoting you to say a verse, yes or no, but it's part of the Torah. So I guess it's always a good idea to be familiar with the verses in the Torah. And even if there's God's name in it, you can say it, you can sing it all day long with like, and nobody's going to complain. But with a blessing, which was made up by the rabbis, a particular formula for a particular reason, they didn't want it to be abused. So then they said that when you have to make the blessing, when we're telling you to make the blessing, then you make it. And if we didn't tell you, don't make it. So then it would be considered a desecration of God's name. So it's dicey. If you have to make the blessing, of course, yes, make it. If you don't have to, stay away. Don't say it when you don't have to. So what do you do here when you're not sure about washing and there's a blessing on the washing? So he says, well, wash to be safe, but don't make the blessing. So my comment is that Mishabur explains, if one has stayed awake all night, he certainly would not have to wash for the reason advanced by Rosh that his hands have unknowingly touched dirty parts of his body. Obviously, if he's awake all night, he knows what he did. But he may have to wash for the reason advanced by Rashba that he's starting a new day of service like the priests in the temple. The day is dawn. It's a new day. So every day you sanctify yourself, you go in, it's a new day of service. So for prayer, we are unsure. We are also unsure about the foul spirit issue. Is it the lifelessness of sleep that brings it on? Because we talked about this foul spirit coming from your touch of death. So night is sleep. Is it sleep that brings that lifelessness? Or is it just general lifelessness of the night? Especially as it used to be before electricity, when everything was dead, there was no life going on except the night owls. But human activity was pretty well curtailed. So which one is that touch of death? Ramah's comments seem to be adding, not disagreeing. Rabbi Karo would agree with him, assume, since the standard really is not to express God's name in a blessing, that may be unnecessary. So I don't think Rabbi Karo certainly wouldn't disagree with that, and he might have not bothered writing it because he would assume that would be the de facto practice, and the Ramah came around and wrote it out loud. Okay, so we're going on to the next paragraph. Number 14. If one arose from bed before daybreak and washed up, by the way, we have this problem every year. There's one holiday where it's become customary to stay up all night. I don't know if you guys ever up all night. You don't want to be up all night. It means you weren't feeling well. Something was bothering you. So you don't even want to talk about that. But there is one night in the Jewish year that it's very customary to stay up all night, and that is the night that we received the Torah, the night before the day we received the Torah. And the legend is that at Sinai, we came there 49 days after exiting Egypt, and we were told, coming to the mountain, we're going to the next day, God's going to come down. He's going to give us this thing. We're going to have a visitation, and the people were prepared for it. They had at least 3 days notice, and then the legend is that they slept in that morning. They didn't wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to greet this tremendous event, which may be is strange. At any rate, that's the legend. So to sort of compensate for that, it's customary, especially the young, the student boys, they stay up all night learning to show that they're now desirous of greeting Hashem and of receiving the Torah, and so they stay up learning Torah all night. And I've done it a few times in my lifetime. It's not for me. I just go crazy. Matter of fact, it bothers my stomach, so I've given that up. But a lot of people still do it. So it's a regular occurrence, though. It's a regular event. So this question of what are you doing to stay up all night is not for. It's a regular occurrence. So now he's saying if one arose from bed before daybreak, before the rooster crows, and washed his hands. So he washed his hands, but now he still experienced the night as the day dawned. It is unclear whether he should wash his hands again when daylight appears in order to remove the foul spirit which has affected them or could have affected them because of the nighttime. So the Rama says he should wash his hands without reciting a blessing. Do the same thing again. And my comment is, if it is the general lifelessness of night that brings on the foul spirit, then washing at the end of night is mandatory. And mandatory washings attract a blessing. Again, because of the doubt, maybe it's not the night, maybe it's the sleeping itself. So Rabbi Karo would concur with Ramah not to make the blessing. Okay, so now we go to the next one, 15. If one sleeps during the day, it is unclear whether he should pour water 3 times onto his hands to remove the foul spirit. And again, the Ramah says he should wash his hands without reciting a blessing. And my comment is if it is the lifelessness of sleeping that brings on the foul spirit, then sleep at any time requires a washing upon awakening, and presumably you would make the blessing, but we're not sure which one it is, so we don't make the blessing. Okay. Next paragraph, 16. I mean, you see from all this, though, that there's so much a Jewish fetish to wash your hands after you've done almost anything, and you're like sanctifying. So you it does lead to a much better cleanliness, especially in those days when they didn't realize about the germs, but they were sort of saved by the bell. 16. Shulchan Aruch says King David was diligent not to sleep shitin nishmin, which means 60 breaths, in order not to experience the taste of death. But that's a legend we have. He was very. There's a Talmudic passage about how he used to hang his harp. He had this lyre or the stringed instrument that he was very famous for playing, and they used to hang it above his bed. And there was a certain breeze where he lived, where he set up his domicile, that would come at the midnight or sometime in the middle of the night, and that would stir the strings and create a sound. That was his alarm clock. He'd wake up and he'd learn the rest of the night. And he was a great scholar, in addition to his other. That's how he came to write Psalms, is because he was immersed in Torah all the time. He was at the level of a prophet, if not an actual prophet himself. And so he had a great insights into the Torah, and authored the Psalms with that insight. So on this, the Ramah says, but in the Talmud, in the chapter Hayashan, which means the one who sleeps, it appears that he was diligent in this only during daytime. And that's his own opinion. See the Beit Yosef, which is Rabbi Yosef Karo's commentary on the Torah. At any rate, the main piece of information there is that he was diligent not to sleep 60 breaths, like 40 winks, like we say 40 winks. They said 60 breaths. So, because that would not to experience the taste of death. Now, 60 is an interesting number. 60 is the measure used that, let's say you have kosher food and some non-kosher food falls in by accident. you have to throw the whole thing out. So the measure is one of the famous measures is that if it's less than 1/60th, it's fallen in, so it's absorbed, it's nullified by the remainder, by the 60 parts. 60 parts the one that nullifies it. So when you say that he wouldn't sleep 60 breaths, now, so it's that kind of thing that the 60 would nullify the one he took. It would make it something substantial if he slept for 60 breaths, so that would give it substance already, and that would be the taste of death. As long as you're under 60, you don't have enough to annul another portion, which would be your alertness. So that's how I understand that message. So my comment is this paragraph proves my contention, first presented in paragraph 2 above, that the foul spirit linking from sleep is the same sort of tame of impurity associated with death. Because he says here, in order not to experience state of death. He hadn't said that before. So that's what I got my idea from back there. And this is the first time Rabbi Caro has mentioned death. He only talked so far about just the fact that this foul spirit came from something. Okay, so I have to explain how I got this idea. The next paragraph is, some have the custom to wash their mouth in the morning because of the mucus which is in the mouth. They didn't have, not that I'm aware of, they didn't have, certainly didn't have commercial mouthwashes. They may have had other mints that they used. So my comment on this concept best aligns with Russia's rationale for washing after sleeping, namely to cleanse oneself from having touched dirty parts of the body, just as the hands, which hold the siddur, the tzitzis, and the tefillin, should be clean, so to the mouth that will express the holy words. So the mouth gets pasty, tasty, and so there's an idea of washing it out, making sure it's clean and fresh. And again, and this is just re-emphasizing to ourselves the holiness that we can achieve by taking action, and that we have to do things in order to improve the circumstance in which we find ourselves. That's life. When it says some have the custom up here, I assume it means as a matter of religious practice rather than a personal habit. The difference would be that a personal habit might occasionally be missed, which would not be the case for religious practice. I further assume that this practice has not been universally adopted because Russell's rationale for washing it is not the only one. Since another rationale might be the correct one, not everyone has accepted mouth rinse as a rigorous religious practice. So I'm just commenting on just the hints, the perception. We don't have a very detailed written records of how people behaved those days. You have to gather from the hints. So I'm just analyzing guessing at how they lived those days. Number 18. The following things require washing of the hands in water, after you do them. One who rises from bed, goes out of the bathroom or of the bathhouse. So when you get up from the morning, which we've been talking about, when you go out of the washroom, you've done your things, or you've bathed. One who cuts his nails, one who takes off his shoes, touches his feet, or washes his head, which is some say also one who goes among the dead, or touch the dead. One who cleanses his clothes of lice. That was a perennial problem. I had to inspect their clothes for that. One who has sexual intercourse, touches a louse, or touches his body with his hand. Anyone doing any of these and not washing his hands, if he is a scholar, his studies are forgotten. And if he is not a scholar, he goes out of his mind. Well, that's really scary. So they didn't want to pull their punches there. And that's, well, let me see what I say there. But all these things are examples of where you're just taking care of your body or a dead body and stuff like that. Yeah, the dirtier part of life. And they want you to either cleanse it or sanctify it in some way. Keep that in mind. So my comment is the eye-catching comment here is the consequence of not washing hands, either forgetting one's learning in the case of a scholar or for everyone else, losing one's mind. The common denominator between the two seems to be reduced cognitive prowess. Are we being warned about a physical result or a spiritual one? If a physical one, such as some kind of dementia, we must ask, as we did in paragraph 5 above, why are medical consequences recorded in a work on halacha? And if it's a spiritual consequence, why should the failure to wash result in such an outcome? Those are my questions. So wait for the next paragraph. So he says, Shulchan Aruch, one who lets blood from his shoulders and didn't wash his hands. Now this was very common. This is like taking aspirins for a headache. In those days, they let blood for everything. So one who does that and didn't wash his hands will be afraid for 7 days. That's what's going to happen. You're gonna have this anxiety. One who takes a haircut or shaves and does not wash his hands will be afraid for 3 days. One who cuts his nails and does not wash his hands will be afraid for 1 day. And in any of these 3 situations, he will not know what he is afraid of. So my comment, again, we have an eye-catching consequence, unwarranted fear. Today we might call that anxiety. There's one activity listed in this paragraph that was also listed in the previous one, nail cutting. And this presents a problem. If one doesn't wash after cutting his nails, what happens? Reduced cognitive prowess, like I said first time, or anxiety. If both, why is that true only of cutting nails? So one possible resolution, and there's the questions I'm asking, I didn't see anybody answering, so I'm just thinking out loud here. One possible resolution is to assume that paragraph 18 describes what happens when a person regularly fails to wash hands after any of the listed activities, whereas paragraph 19 describes the result of an isolated incident. So if you always neglect to wash your hands after these things, you're going to get this lose your learning or lose your mind. If at one time, you're going to have this anxiety. Another takeaway from this paragraph is the inference that the reduced cognitive prowess described in paragraph 18 is a spiritual, some might prefer the word emotional, consequence rather than a physical one. I say this because the anxiety described in paragraph 19 is most certainly a spiritual or emotional consequence. Because the one is not physical, you're a fear. It's a fear. So it's either spiritual or emotional, since the emphasis is on the sufferer's inability to understand it. I provide a broader interpretation of the issues presented above and below in the last paragraph below. So you got to wait some more. Number 20, one who washes his face but does not wipe it well. His face cracks or is stricken with boils. The medicine for this is to wash it with a lot of to wash it a lot in beet juice. By comment, this cannot be a spiritual or emotional issue because there is no instruction to wipe one's face well, for which a failure to do so should attract some heavenly reaction. He's just telling you this is a fact. The source for the advice is a passage in Talmud Shabbos 133b, the tractate dealing with the rules of Shabbos, and the context suggests this is pure medical advice. In fact, it is a secret that was entrusted to those in the know. A Google search reveals that beet juice is rich in antioxidants and good for the skin. So it seems to have been, they're just telling you some well-known or secretly known medical advice, and they want everybody to know it. Okay, we got a ways to go to the last paragraph, and we're just about out of time. So I'm going to stop here, and I'll leave my marker, and we'll get a little bit of a review next time. And that's going to be this coming Wednesday night, right? Okay. Okay, so that's it. So I hope there's a little esoteric material.
Does anybody in the Zoom meeting there, Grace, Robbie, Ronald, have any questions or comments for the rabbi?
No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm in the process, I should mention, of preparing some material. Again, I composed this. This was originally done for a Jewish group, and so I haven't really edited it to maybe find something, hone it down for more interest of Noahide group. And so, if there's any part that you'd like to skip or you find surprising, just let me know. Let me know, because if I don't get your feedback, I won't know what how I'm doing. And that's
Well,
all
we
I got.
appreciate what you've been sharing, Rabbi. It's been somewhat informative. I mean, not that I would wash with beet juice, but definitely if you don't wipe your face, I mean, you get oil build up in
If
the
you're
creases.
watching, you examine the ingredients where that stuff comes from in all those lotions that we have today.
My wife is Ukrainian, and she made a bunch of beet borscht yesterday, so the whole house smelled like beet juice. And yeah,
Let's see if your skin improves over the next few days.
well, yeah. All right. Well, I guess so, folks. We plan to be back on Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So till then, we're going to sign out of our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz, and we'll see you Wednesday. Bye for now.
Bye bye.